Mics are on. They are ready on the left, ready on the right. Hey, Jim. How are you this evening? Good. Good to see you. Call the meeting to order. This is the Calaveras Council of Governments meeting for May 7th. We are in the Government Center Board of Supervisors chambers, and I'll invite you all to join me in the Pledge to Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, very good. First part of the agenda is the consent agenda, items 1 through 6. Consent agenda items are generally considered to be routine and non-controversial and are normally enacted by the board in one motion, unless any member of the board or staff or public want to pull an item from consent prior to the vote. Does any member of the board want to pull an item from consent? Any member of staff want to pull an item from consent? The public want to pull an item from consent? The chair is open to a motion on the balance of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Councilmember Ponte moved the items, and a second by Councilmember Morris. I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None noted. That passes unanimously. Okay, we'll now move to the regular agenda. This is public comment, 5 minutes per person, 15 minutes per topic. The three members out there, I believe, know the terms of public comment, so I'm not going to go any further than that. Would any of you gentlemen like to address the board on a non-agendized item this evening? I didn't think so. We'll move on then. Item number 8 is already before us. This is the county report. Mr. Miller, would you like to give us your report this evening?
Yes, sir. I'll be giving you two reports. I'll be giving you the county report and the transit report.
Alrighty.
County report is we submitted the feasibility report on the intercity service to Stockton to our board on April 29th, requesting that they accept it. And we also submitted to them the request for authorization to submit for the grant that would allow us to have a pilot or a trial program for the intercity bus program, and they approved that also. And the same evening, they approved the FTA drug and alcohol policy. That's what I have for the county this evening. Now I'm the transit manager. I'll step out and step back. We've received 3 plans for bus shelters. On the bus shelter project, we actually have plans in hand that we're going to be submitting to Caltrans probably next week. And we've been promised the other 3 shelter plans should come in shortly. On Friday, May 23rd, we will have Cliff Chambers and Halsey King on site all day doing our maintenance evaluation of our transit maintenance. They'll actually be interviewing our mechanics, looking at our tool inventories, looking at our work practices, how we approach working on the buses, and how we track our costs. And that's part of the CCOG study that was authorized here a few months ago. It was initially supposed to start at the first week of April, and there was an illness with the consultant, and that's what it was rescheduled later for. Cynthia Lawrence from Paratransit has given me a very, very preliminary proposal for taking over maintenance on the transit system if we decide that's one option. I say very preliminary because she roughed out some numbers for me. And I said we'd firm it up and we'd talk about it, and we'll probably start working on that in the next few weeks. I'd like to also report that the staff at Paratransit has started installing schedule holders and some more of the trash receptacles at the existing stops. And that's it. And I have if anybody's interested, I have a few extra copies of what the plan is for Friday. If anybody wants to come by during the day and see what the consultant's doing, you're welcome to. Pass these up, and they can be distributed or passed on.
Really?
And that's it, unless you have any questions for me.
You sure you want me to come by, Mike?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. I'm driving the oldest Ford Explorer, so I know you won't pick on me.
I'm not worried
And
about that one.
it's on wheels.
Hey, Mike?
Yeah, go Go ahead.
Can you tell me where, if they were to do the maintenance on the bus, on the transit, where they would do that?
The facility that's at Pool Station Road, we previously had a maintenance facility there, and that's the building we're still leasing. And they would probably extend their lease there, depending on how long it is. The other aspect of this is that there would be some capital equipment purchases necessary. One of them we already have, which is the bus lift.
Right.
But other tools and things that would be retained by the county because they are capital investments and not operating investments. So we would probably negotiate to go right back there.
So they would do the maintenance, but we would provide maintenance equipment?
Yes. We provide the equipment because if the contract were to change with the operator, we would be retaining equipment we could use for future operators.
Right, so, but not all of it, right? Just
Just the core stuff. We're not talking about all the little hand tools and
All
things.
right.
We're talking about air compressors, things like that.
Okay, good. That sounds really good, actually.
Okay?
Any other questions?
Mike, I had a question. We had met with the San Andreas community about the bus shelter projects, the three of them here in San Andreas, and we had gone over the funding cycle and identified a reversion date or a sunset date of September 30th. And so I was wondering are we moving forward with an extension on those, or do we have a plan still to continue moving forward with the projects?
We have a letter that came from Cal OES, actually two, that said we had extended the deadline till September 30th. But we also received verbal and a written confirmation, but nothing actually from the state through the transit consultant that said we could extend beyond that deadline. Now that we have 3 sets of plans that are actually going into Caltrans, and the others should be there shortly, we might not be going very far beyond September 30th, but we are going to be looking into that.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, Mike or Melissa may need to answer this question. There was a follow-up in the minutes on whether forms were submitted for the PTMI SEA, which was tardy back in February, and Mr. Dreyer assured us that that would be done. Can you give me assurances that that was done in the last 30 days?
They were submitted on April 11th, and then I submitted them to Caltrans.
All right. That's
We get
make sure.
frequent reminders when we have deadlines coming up, and they figured the source is to send me everything. And then I distribute it from there.
So it's working.
It's working.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gedney's up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Gedney, Caltrans District 10. Just briefly, if I could just touch on a couple of meetings we had recently with your staff. I thought we had a very productive meeting last week on the partnership planning, actually this week, on the partnership planning grant that was received, COG and City of Angels in partnership with Caltrans to try to resolve that issue around 449 with all the land use and all the circulation, Dogtown Road, Foundry Lane, Angel Oak subdivision. It's quite a conundrum, and I thought we had a very productive discussion. Dave Hannum was very animated about his ideas of how to resolve this, and so I think we have some good leadership on that, and we look forward to interviewing the consultants next week and getting somebody on board to see if we can get a plan in place to move forward on that. And then on NHS, we're still moving forward on NHS as well. Thank you for your support on that. Mariposa has sent resolutions to their Board of Supervisors, as has Tuolumne County, asking for support. I've sent the information, the corrected or the changed California road system maps up to headquarters for their review with the request that it be changed, and they've advised that they'd like to see District 3 and District 6 participate with logical termini all the way down to State Route 41 up through State Highway or Interstate 80. I think I mentioned before there is one segment that's already on the NHS north of Interstate 80 from Auburn up through Grass Valley and Nevada City. They see it as a logical movement. We did recommend just from our submittal to go from 140 in Mariposa up to Highway 16 in Amador because we've gotten really no response from District 3 and District 6, Madera and El Dorado. For what reason, I don't know right now. Maybe Matt Boyer might have some insight into El Dorado. Anyway, we hope they'll get on board and participate. And I think that the policy conference that you hosted, thank you very much for hosting that. I thought that was very informative, and I think it laid clearly the issues that we're faced with now with lack of funds, especially the Highway Trust Fund that's projected to go insolvent this summer. With that said, I think you might have seen Secretary Fox's proposal for the new transportation bill. They're talking about increasing funds for roads and highways by 22%, while they're recommending increasing transit by 70%. And I think that falls in line with the discussion we heard at the policy conference, where future transportation funding is going to be focused. And I think that lends even more impetus for our proposal to try to get 49 into the NHS so we can get some money to continue upgrades and rehabilitation of that facility over time. So again, thank you very much for that policy conference. I think it was a good jumping off place for us to try to start having some good discussions on where we go from here.
Okay, questions, Mr. Gidney, this evening?
So if I can add to the discussion of the NHS, we did meet with city and county staff on the NHS discussion, and county and city staff will be moving forward with the resolutions to their governing boards for the reclassification and designation of 49. Caltrans will be moving forward with that. I've also requested from city and county staff that they get direction to request from the COG that we apply for the reclassification and the designation of State Route 4. So once the Board of Supervisors approves 49, then I expect them to give direction to their staff to begin working with COG on the necessary application for State Route 4 as discussed here. But ultimately, the expectation is that that direction would come to the COG on behalf of the governing boards of the city and the county, and then that way, with your direction, we could go ahead and prepare that application for them as well. So I think that that will be our next steps as city and county and COG staff.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Well, I skipped over item 10, the city report. Bert, did you want to give a city report tonight?
Can I make a comment?
You sure can.
Excuse me. I'm sure if Dave Hannum were here tonight, one of the things he would probably report on is last night the city council identified and selected the project that it's going to submit to the COG for the active transportation program. And I raised a couple of questions with Dave last night. If I can raise them here, maybe Melissa can help. I was curious to know, I understand that the two applications that this body submits will compete in the rural set-aside round. Is there any strategy or philosophy to, I know for political reasons, the bodies would like to spread the money around to as many jurisdictions as possible. So do smaller costing projects, are they more competitive than larger projects? Is it possible that one Calaveras COG project could be approved and the other denied? Or?
Well, actually, Calaveras Council of Governments is just providing the resources and support to the member agencies so that you can apply directly. So the city and county will be applying, but we are preparing all of the grant support. We're preparing the application for you based on the priorities that we've identified. I think what we are trying to do is work with our partners at the city and county to start creating these processes where we could make or help the local jurisdictions make tough decisions on local priorities, because what you're seeing is the state and feds having a limited amount of funding, and they're developing the systems and strategies to limit and concentrate those investments. And I think local agencies are going to have the same responsibility. So we facilitated a process where we tried to kind of gather from our list of RTP sort of a data-driven process based on accident rates, based on collision history, that kind of information. And also it was a community-driven process. We hosted a webinar, we solicited feedback. That way, the priorities that we give to you, you have the information and they can be informed decisions based on what we consider the most competitive projects, because that is in your interest, is as a region to put forward your most competitive projects. We did work with the local jurisdictions though, because of the timing of this program. It was 3 years of funding consolidated into 2. Right. So it's in the city's best interest to put forward sort of what we call the low-hanging fruit this cycle, because you want to demonstrate to the feds your ability to deliver these projects. I think that this is going to be a program that's around for a considerable amount of time. There's a large investment by the state and the feds into this program. So I think it's just putting us in a position to take advantage of that program for bigger projects in the future. And that's sort of how we identified the list. And programs in the past, like the Transportation Enhancement Program, those were programs that the county would get direct formula distributions and apportionments. So the local jurisdiction could decide, do we want some to go in Moke Hill? Do we want some to go in Arnold? Where do we want these funds concentrated in for what projects? With this program, we don't have that luxury then to decide if there's enough money for every district. It's the most competitive project, regardless of the district. We are doing 2 applications, though. We did have the conversation with the city and county. Do we need to submit 1 regional project? In talking with a consultant who's helping us to facilitate the process, he felt comfortable that we have 2 applications from Calaveras, 1 priority project being from the city and 1 priority project being from the county. But he did stress important for the county and the city to get behind 1 project and to demonstrate that you're all in on that project. The other issue that we talked about with the local jurisdictions is ability to commit the match. So that was something that staff needed to consider. COG hasn't initiated our call for projects, so I can't guarantee to your staff that there will be funding that they can commit as a match. So the local jurisdictions had to look internally at their current resources to budget. So that also affected how we prioritize those projects.
Okay, and we did all that. Last night, we selected pedestrian improvements along Highway 49, actually additional crossing protection at 6 intersections. And the one nice thing about that, if it's an option, if funding becomes tight, this is actually 6 projects in one. The project could go forward with being 50% funded, but we were going to apply for a maximum of 6 assisted crosswalks with the flashing lights and the signage and so forth. And, I just hope it's competitive. It meets one of the priorities.
What was the estimated cost for all 6?
It's, including the local match, our estimate is $600,000. So we'd be applying for $531,000 in ATP funds with a local match of $68,000.
And does the City of Angels have that local match?
Yes.
Okay,
So, anyway, I'm sure Dave will report it on that.
all right, very good. All righty, let's move on then to item number 12, fiscal year 2014 funding allocations. Resolutions A, B, and C are all brought to us by Melissa Raggio, so why don't you take them in order, Melissa, introduce the topic, and I guess we've got three action items, so maybe we'll just take them one at a time rather than all at once.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind you, all of these actions have already been previously voted on and approved in the overall work program amendment that we just approved in March. So I'm just going to go through the heading, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy.
That'd be fine.
12A, staff recommends the approval of resolution number fiscal year 1428, allocating $27,000 of bike and pedestrian funds to the overall work program to fund the contract amendment for the county bike and pedestrian master plan. Staff also recommends the approval of resolution number 1429, allocating $13,200 of bike, cycle, and pedestrian funds to the Calaveras County Public Works Department, and their claim is attached.
Any questions on this item? The chair is open to a motion on 12A.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion and a second by council members Edson and Colm. Is there further discussion? Is there public comment on this item? I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None noted. That passes unanimously. 12B, please.
Staff recommends the approval of resolution number 1430, authorizing the allocation of fiscal year 2014 Regional Surface Transportation Program Funds, RSTP, in the amount of $183,000 for the Calaveras County Public Works Department, and their claim is attached.
All right. Questions or comments on this item? Public comment on this item. Chair is open to a motion on item 12B. So moved. Motion by Councilmember Heminger, second by Councilmember Morris. Is there further discussion on this item? I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None noted. That passes unanimously as well. 12C, Melissa.
Staff recommends the approval of resolution number 1431, authorizing the allocation of fiscal year 2013-14 local transportation funds in the amount of $25,275 to fund the overall work program amendment number 3 approved by the council in March.
Okay, LTF funds going to roads a little bit, I see. So Mr. Caldwell is not here to call us out, so we'll just move on. Is there a public comment on this item? Okay, if there's no further comment, I'll call for the vote on 12C.
So moved.
Councilmember Morris moves the item.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Colm seconds the item. I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None noted. That passes unanimously. Okay, moving right along. Melissa, I believe item number 13 is yours as well. Why don't you introduce the topic for us and we'll keep moving forward.
Staff is requesting the approval of a draft subrecipient agreement between the Calaveras Council of Governments and the Calaveras County Public Works Department as the transit operator. Staff recommends the council approve this draft agreement. And this agreement outlines the roles and responsibilities for delivery of the transit capital projects approved in the PTMI-SDA expenditure plan. I've attached a draft and I've submitted this draft to the Public Works Director, but I just wanted to let you know that we're open for comments, any concerns. You know, this is still in a working form. I haven't received any comments from the Public Works Director as of yet, and then it will go through the county's legal counsel also, and I will try to incorporate all of these changes and bring back to you.
I do have a comment.
Yes,
or
go ahead.
Concern on. In reading through the document, I totally understand the reason for the subrecipient agreement and what it actually performs. The concern I have is with the Exhibit A. As we've talked about several meetings now, there's considerable monies under this program that aren't being used, that projects are not coming forward to spend these monies. And by using the Exhibit A as presented, we're basically tying the sum total of, is it 1.8 million?
Yes.
Yeah. The entire $1.8 million is becoming part of this subrecipient agreement. And I can say with confidence that the City of Angels Camp is working at this time to come forward with projects within the next couple of months that'll be regional-wide, regional benefit to the transit system. And we want to have the ability to submit these projects for consideration of some of these monies. So my question and I guess suggestion to Melissa when we talked on the phone was to tie the monies that are currently allocated or appropriated to the transit district, but not include all the funds. That way, if the city does come forward with a project and it has merit and this body approves it, we don't have to undo what this subrecipient agreement already has in place. And I think Melissa has an idea of how that could happen.
Yes, so I've come up with an example that would replace this Exhibit A. What I referenced throughout the subrecipient agreement is this program expenditure plan, which has to come before this board for approval before I can submit it to Caltrans. So in my staff report that I brought to the council in April, it had identified, the chart, and it had a star, on all of the projects after the fiscal year 9-10 of 168 and 143. So everything beneath that were placeholders. And I reported that we've met with the county transit operator, and they had reported at this time they don't have any new projects to submit for that available funding. So I haven't had a chance to run this past my legal counsel, so we may need to go back and work through some of these. But this is one suggestion, is revising the Exhibit A to only show the projects that the county currently has programmed. They have allocated and submitted all the forms to Caltrans, and I have received the funding on. Anything beyond this, I do not have allocated with Caltrans. So this chart identifies the projects that the county is working on. It identifies the funding that they have allocated. I just want to point out the star that I mentioned at the bottom. Once the city or county have programmed a project amount and I've submitted it to Caltrans, you're supposed to be submitting based on a hard and fast quote. You are saying that you are ready to deliver this project. You don't go forward to Caltrans and allocate these funds unless you are ready to go. So what we've had happen is we identify that we are going to spend $20,000 on trash receptacles. We only spend $16,000. That triggers that they are sending in their final expenditure report, and now I have to come back to you. So right now, they aren't going to close that out until I come to you and revise this expenditure plan reflecting the actual dollars spent on the project. So right now, I'm in the middle of working with the county public works department. We're trying to get that together to bring before you so we can make that whole again. So this will be coming back to you time and time again to reflect that in the agreement.
I think our goal too would be to work with the county so that when they allocate and claim the funds, that the funds that are programmed are realistic dollar amounts that they anticipate expending. Because what Melissa's saying is if we continue to claim more and allocate more than we need, then we're going to continue to go through this process of amending this sub-recipient agreement, which means it needs to go before the Board of Supervisors and it needs to go before the CCOG Board. But I think that I appreciate that and can stand here and recommend that as a solution, because I think it'll get us to more seriously look at the dollar amounts that we're plugging in to this expenditure sheet. One of the issues that we have also with this expenditure sheet, I think it's been revised 5 times in the last year. So that's something that we want to get away from as well. And I think that the sub-recipient agreement is a way the County Board of Supervisors are aware of the commitment, they're aware of what's been allocated, and they're aware of the projects that need to be delivered. And I support the idea of not including the full expenditure plan worksheet, because we've all recognized that the majority of those funds are still identified with a placeholder, and to allocate those funds will require further board action by the CCOG. So for that reason, I support removing this expenditure plan in the consideration of an alternative. Yeah.
Okay. Jim, are you okay with the change in the contract relative to what we're talking?
We came into this because the Caltrans guidelines require essentially this kind of this sort of agreement, which is essentially an MOU between us and Public Works to define the nature of the relationship. I agree, Exhibit A, as I understand how he's been talking, should be pulled, but the recommendation really is to have you approve the format of the document itself. Hopefully the Board of Supervisors will do the same, and that'll be something we can just use essentially for
Okay, so the contract doesn't change in any way by just deleting the
and then amendments become a
schedule.
one-line
Okay.
amendment.
Okay. Does that
I'm
address your
happy
concern?
with that, yeah. And we're looking forward to presenting some projects in the months ahead.
Okay. Do we need to take an action relative to removing that, or can we just adopt the resolution as it is and then just basically leave that out?
Did I submit a resolution?
We asked for a minute order. I think it would be direction to staff to amend the Exhibit A, and then I think direction for staff to continue to work with County Public Works and Legal Counsel to get support. And this has happened before. We like to bring this information to you, make you aware of the agreements that we're negotiating on your behalf. The county most likely will have recommendations for changes, and we bring those forward to you as well. But I think we just want you to be aware of the agreements that we're negotiating with the county, the reasons behind them. So I would just ask for
So it's a
the
minute
minute
order.
order
Yeah.
with directions
You've got
to
a minute
modify the
order.
exhibit.
Okay.
For somebody who looks at this record later, it should be clear that you're not approving the dividend.
Well, that's the key. So by minute order, we're going to adopt what's before us and direct staff to remove that Schedule A.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is everybody clear on that? Is there public comment on this item? Chair is open to a motion.
So moved.
Councilmember Ponte? Councilmember Colm, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None noted. That passes unanimously. So staff can understand what we did. Okay, very good. All right, then item number 14, I'll turn this over to our Executive Director, Melissa Eads. I'm sure we'll introduce Mr. Boyer again, and you guys want to have about an hour presentation before us.
Perfect.
Concluding with questions and comments from the board.
Very good. So thank you very much. I want to thank the council and Caltrans, our county and city staff, for attending the annual policy conference. From a staff perspective, we're very pleased with the turnout of the event, and we are grateful for your time and attendance. This was a follow-up, I think, to the strategic direction that the Council of Governments provided the COG Board in 2013-14. We had an opportunity, we sort of commingled that strategic planning session with an orientation for new members, and we got a list of items that you felt important for the COG Board to focus on. So we're going to start with highlighting those, giving you an update of where we've been. I'm going to then introduce Matt Boyer, who's going to pick up with the annual policy conference, sort of go over with the COG Board what the key themes and takeaways were. And then what we want to do is just have a conversation with you about your goals and direction for us, whether it be 1 year, 3 year, or 5 years for the Council of Governments. And I think that this is an important discussion for us to have, and I think it's good to be thinking beyond just the 1 year annual work programs that we operate in. Because for us in transportation planning, a lot of what we do is multiple years, whether it's planning and then the phases of a project, or just the 3 years if everything goes well for a project. So it's good to know what our council priorities are. And it also helps us when we're setting the stage for the city and county, and as they're working through the identification of their priorities locally. So I'll start with the direction from the council in 2013. One of the first things that we had was, first and foremost, continue to plan. So I want to just recognize Amber, our transportation planner, for the work that she's done in 13-14. We have completed the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan, the Intercity Feasibility Plan. We are near completion of a Bike and Ped Master Plan. We've started the process of our Short Range Transit Plan. We complete every year faithfully the Unmet Transit Needs process. I'm really proud of the grant and the partnership that we have with the city and county on the Gateway Corridor study. We just issued the RFP, as John was giving an update, and I think that that is going to be a great planning document for the region as well. And then planning with the council. We have our annual meeting and then this evening's event. So those are just a few, and Amber deserves credit for the lion's share of all of those planning documents. Maximize the funds that flow through the agency. I think one thing I'd love to point out is we did a 3-year call for projects. This council will have its opportunity for another 3-year cycle call for projects that will be starting in July. In that 3-year call for projects, we identified $4.5 million approximately in funds that comes through the Council of Governments. The city and county, mostly the county, was really instrumental in turning that into $22 million worth of capital improvement projects in the region. So that, not so much a COG credit, but definitely city and county working together to utilize the funds that we have as matches for bigger state and federal projects. Also on this, I want to point out maximizing the funds that flow through the agency. Since the shift in the Council of Governments over the last 3 years, our work program is going to be focused solely on COG priority projects. and our core functions, as the COG outlined. So what you're seeing is a shift away of those city and county projects from our overall work program. And the city and county have been moving forward, and they're directly allocating those funds. Those funds are going directly to the local jurisdictions. So we bring that up, one, because you'll see less funds pass through our organization, but because we're hitting this peak where we're transitioning out of those projects, and there aren't new projects coming through the COG, it's creating a cash flow situation. We're managing it, but it'll be something that we talk about. But we are maximizing the funds that come to the region, not necessarily through the agency. Focus on interagency partnership. This is always a goal, something that we work on. I think it's been our priority. Relationships and partnerships, I think the theme of the goals that the council outlined for me last year. We've been working closely with Caltrans, obviously the city and county, our other RTPA partners, whether it be SJCOG, StarenCOG, and/or Alpine or Tuolumne. And I think the support that we were able to rally with Matt Boyer's help as well kind of demonstrates our ability to work with our interagency partners. Also, I think the discussion of the NHS issue and our ability to engage our other neighbors is also important. Continue to focus on progress and deadlines of major projects, and then we have Wagon Trail. First, just to report, Wagon Trail is on schedule, and they are estimating completion of P&ED by December 2015, and then we are on track for the funding strategy that the CCOG Board had adopted with our 2014 RTIP, so that's great news. But in terms of focusing on progress and deadlines, we are working really closely with your city and county staff on our CIP tool. And I think that's proving really beneficial in terms of monitoring those deadlines and critical dates, and also providing us a way to communicate more effectively with city and county staff. The next item we had was improved sensitivity. So this is something we did by hosting a sensitivity training that county and city staff were invited, and it mostly served to benefit our transit staff, which they did participate, and it was facilitated by one of our staff members, so that was a good partnership as well. Emphasize communication with agencies and the communities. This is always ongoing, and we were talking today because I was asking staff, okay, what are some examples? And they said every day, there's not a day that goes by that we are not in contact with Caltrans, the city, the county, or a community group on some transportation issue. So this is always ongoing, but I think tools that we're proud of, and I think that we've sort of honed in on and sort of crafted, is the TAC and how we engage the member agencies through the Technical Advisory Committee. We have meeting minutes and action items now. The council can take a look at those on our websites. I think the CIP is a great tool for emphasizing that communication. And also we have our new COG website in its simplest form as a public outreach tool. And I think the creation of our Bike and Walk Calaveras website. We're partnering with different groups on that in the community, whether it be public health or other nonprofits who are hosting events. We're wanting to demonstrate ourselves as a resource for active transportation in the community. Continuing to work with our member agencies, and we were saying today, well, that's standard operating procedures now. It's something that we're always working to support the member agencies, and our number one goal, and what we really want to get out of this night, is how do we continue to be a resource for the member agencies? And I think that that's one of the things that we're really looking to the Board of Supervisors and the City Council, is as we go through these transitionary times, how is it that COG can sort of hold this center and continue to be a resource and provide you with the tools and the support that you need in your jurisdictions. Then we had the focus on project delivery. And as you know, project delivery is not one of the COG core functions, but we're partners with the city and county in helping them program their projects so that they can obligate or allocate those funds and deliver. I have to say that the county has completed all of the T projects. We have one T project remaining, and they are in the middle of construction of that project. We've closed out all of the Ebbets Pass Scenic Byway projects that we had previously in our work program. We've completed several planning projects that I identified earlier, and the city and county over the 3-year periods of our funding cycle have either allocated or obligated all of the funds that they had programmed, with the exception of our 1226 project, and we just recently experienced a delay in our construction allocation, but we were able to negotiate that exchange with SJCOG, and the county is still aggressively continuing to move that project forward. So I think it's still good news. So maintain a balanced focus on planning, funding, and project implementation. And I think really this comes to the heart of our partnership with the local jurisdictions. So our focus is always the planning and funding. And one of the things that we're working closely with city and county staff is that planning process and its importance. Not only its importance in terms of public outreach and engaging diverse members of our community, but in working with the local jurisdictions to identify their key priorities. Because that's really what's going to be critical in us being successful in getting funding in this new transportation world that we live in. So we're doing a lot of things, and I want to thank the city for sort of standing by us and kind of venturing through this ATP process and having some faith in the prioritization and seeing where it goes and how effective it is, because we're looking at a similar process for the Bike and Ped Master Plan. It's a new world. We're trying. We're open to feedback. It might not work all the time, but we're open to adapting. And really the goal is to help the city and county meet their priorities, get them funded so that they can be the ones that implement those projects. Work through difficulty of funding sources. So we still do that. Number one priority project for the region is Highway 4 Wagon Trail. I want to thank the council for really committing and making this policy statement, because I think that this has really helped me throughout the year. As opportunities come, I know that I go out and I talk to the state and the feds knowing that I have the Calaveras Council of Governments behind me and that their number one priority project is the Wagon Trail project. So with that, we have applied for the Federal Lands Access Program grant. That was a stretch. We weren't successful in that grant program. We are not leaving any stones unturned. I think that's one of the things we're trying to demonstrate to Caltrans. We just recently applied for a Tiger grant, which is a federal program. That is also a stretch. The priorities of the state, as you've heard, they're shifting. And so it's getting harder and harder to make the case for our state highway projects. But nonetheless, we're trying, we're not giving up. We're trying to find new ways to sort of package the project so we can work with the state and feds to meet their goals and objectives. But that being said, we secured the $1.4 million loan that's going to move us forward with the construction of a segment within the SIP cycle. So we're happy with that, to say the least, and we'll continue to move forward, no stone unturned. And at the very least, I hope it continues to demonstrate to Caltrans that it's our number one priority project and we won't give up. Receive more bicycle and infrastructure funding. This we're working on. We are primarily in the planning phases of this. We're working on that Bike and Ped Master Plan. We're working with the city and county on the prioritization of their local projects so that we can go out and start competing for those active transportation funds or Tiger grant funds, whatever the next wave of funding will be. And focus on projects that bring visitors and provide economic development benefits. I think the master plan is a good plan to take a look at and see if that meets the council's goals and this objective. I think the Gateway Corridor study for State Route 4 and 49 will really hit home this objective, because I think that it's going to go a long way in terms of increasing the attractiveness of the city, the livability principles, all of those things that we talk about so many times. And also I think in terms of economic development benefits and bringing visitors to our area, one thing that stands out to me is Tuolumne County, their presentation that they made in the afternoon at the end of the day, and how they're working to kind of leverage their transportation and public infrastructure investments with what attracts private investments and what they think brings an economic development benefit. And so that's something I think that I would ask the council to continue to think about as Matt facilitates a discussion amongst us, because we will be doing a new call for projects, and we will be taking to the city and county a request for the prioritization of their project list. But what we can do is we can define that playing field. What are our priorities, and how do we want to evaluate those projects? Because ultimately it'll come before the COG to make the best determination of regional priority with the limited amount of money that we do have. So I think that that's something that we can continue to keep on the radar and in discussions.
So I have a question on that.
Sure.
It says, focus on projects that bring visitors and provide economic development benefits. To where?
To the region.
Okay, so what's that mean?
I guess I would ask the council. For me, we took that as a broad policy statement and we implemented where possible. So the City of Angels Camp, for example, their priorities line up with this COG board policy statement with the Gateway Corridor study. So I think that that's the other opportunity that we have here, and part of the discussion is really defining the roles and responsibilities of the COG. So it is the responsibility of the local jurisdictions, the Board of Supervisor and the City Council, to identify your priority list of projects. You've all done that. And I think then the opportunity becomes for me to look at these policy statements that you've given me and find those fits, find those connections. I think for the city, the Gateway Corridor study and that partnership planning grant that they had with Caltrans is sort of a perfect example of meeting that policy statement. And then I would encourage, the Board of Supervisors to work with their staff when they're developing their project lists. Your staff will come to you, the city and the county, with their recommendations. And it's up to you then to rank and to prioritize those projects. That's where it starts. And then it comes to the COG board for kind of a final evaluation and then consideration of your policy objectives as well. So that's what that means to me. Okay, so unless there are any questions about 1314 and the objectives of the council as of last year, I'd like to introduce Matt Boyer. He did such a great job, I think, facilitating our annual policy meeting that I thought it would be good to bring him back and facilitate a discussion amongst the board. And our goal really is to get to some solutions, hopefully. If not solutions, some policy statements and objectives for the COG board or staff to work on so that we can determine how best do we work to serve the city and county. So if that's okay, I'll turn it over to Matt.
All right.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Appreciated the wisdom that your director had in pulling that policy conference together, because I think it will be very helpful for a long time moving forward, and not just for this conversation. In terms of the time it took COG staff and myself to pull that together, that was very time consuming. But tonight is the hard part. So that might have been more time consuming, tonight's the hard part. And my goal really is to listen more than it is to talk. But I thought I'd take just a minute and sort of set the stage. The one word that I hope I remember to keep bringing back tonight is alignment. For several reasons. Had a conversation with Mike Miller when I came in tonight. And it was interesting because he and I have some very similar past experiences between my time in El Dorado County, his time in several stints here in Calaveras County. And to paraphrase, his comment was, in 2009, I couldn't see the COG and the county aligning, and I didn't know what to do about it, and it wasn't a happy relationship. And since I've come back, there's been nothing but good, to sort of paraphrase that conversation. And I think that's a huge transformational change. And building on the discussion that you had with your director last year, I think it puts you in a good position to move forward and perhaps build on that. So what we want to do tonight is start to get you to think about, in the next 3 to 5 years, what you'd like COG to be, both in terms of outcomes and in terms of process. And tonight we want to get you to discuss at the deepest level possible, what that might look like. But we also want to make sure that there's a conversation that's built on a foundation. So it's more important, frankly, that we have a wide and solid foundation of a discussion tonight, more than it is that we come up with 2 or 3 ahas or 2 or 3 specifics. Because if those specifics aren't grounded in some kind of foundation, they're not sustainable. And so we want to go as far as we can tonight in terms of mining from you sort of your thoughts and priorities and policy objectives, but also do it in a way that it sort of either tethers together or allows us to build on this in the weeks and months to come. In terms of how we do this, the other bullet that I should have put on this slide, which goes to the point of alignment, is after today, there's two very important steps that will happen in the next month between now and your next board meeting. One is the input and discussion from your board tonight will be filtered by your director and staff to the Technical Advisory Committee at their meeting next month, so that there can begin to be deeper alignment between your priorities and sort of the staff level discussion. The second thing is, those of you that represent or that come from the Board of Supervisors and from the City Council, we would encourage you to have an offline conversation with your staff about in two directions, in terms of what the types of discussions that we have tonight and things that might emanate from your local jurisdictions. And in my experience, what COG has done in its transformation the last 3 years is identical to what we went through in the late 90s in El Dorado County. And the good news was, by getting the COG, or the El Dorado Transportation Commission, down to its core mission, getting extraordinarily good, getting a highly competent staff around us, it set the ability to move forward and do all kinds of great things. And 17 years later, they're still doing amazing things. And you're in that position to do that. Your executive director is amazing. Your staff is amazing. So the alignment piece, though, is COG shouldn't, in my opinion, move forward in a way that's disparate from the city or the county or transit or individual modes and jurisdictions. It really needs to stay aligned. So to the extent that you want to build and grow on your core mission and respond to the needs and challenges that were discussed last week at the policy conference, that only works, in my opinion, in my experience, if those are really in alignment. So I'm going to keep saying the word alignment till one of you throws something at me or says, okay, we get it. But it is really the buzzword for tonight. So in terms of process, Melissa's outlined tonight and in the past sort of the COG core roles and responsibilities. The policy conference in a moment will talk about some of the highlights and some of the key data. I mostly want to listen to what you all took away from that as being most important. And then finally, we want to talk a little bit about what the implications for that are for Calaveras County, and maybe we can have that conversation before we even get to the, well, what do we do about it? So sort of the evolution would be, what are your takeaways? You know, what either questions or realizations, and what are the implications for the region and for your COG responsibilities? So in terms of COG role and responsibility, as I said, your mission right now has basically become to be extraordinarily good at the statutory functions, both in state law and the things that come with it, such as the items that we were discussing earlier tonight. Many of your sister agencies in other counties take on additional functions or responsibilities because they require the same skill sets that your COG staff has. They are somewhat linked to the transportation or related policy matters, and therefore the wisdom from your COG staff can be amplified in some of these other areas. Some of those I would call them voluntary because they're not required by statute. Some of those are focused within the boundaries of that county. So they might be city-county joint efforts. They might be a regional effort that's not directly tied to a city or county government function. But some of them are inter-county. There are many examples of successful partnerships that started years ago between San Joaquin and Stanislaus County in the late 1980s that led to funding Highway 99 and Highway 120 improvements all the way from the edge of Modesto all the way across what became the Manteca Bypass and towards the Bay Area. And those started because of conversations that happened amongst the regional agency staff. So in terms of voluntary efforts, some of them that are multi-jurisdictional can be within the boundaries of the county and some might be across. Some of them also are single jurisdictional. When many agencies, many regional agencies I've worked for in the past, we've given the opportunities for the cities, the counties, and other agencies to say, hey, we've got this issue, and we think you've got a lot of ability. Would you be willing to help us with this? And so those partnerships sometimes form between the regional agencies in just one jurisdiction, and again, take advantage of the skill sets that you have. So without reciting all the details, those are obviously the key speakers that we had: Will Kempton, Sharon Scherzinger, Mike Miller, and then our panel from Caltrans, Darren from Tuolumne County, Wendy Thomas from the Placerville City Council, and Charles Field from the Amador Transportation Commission. And I guess maybe leaving this slide up there, I'd open it up to you to just say, you know, of all of those speakers, was there a message or a speaker that you liked, didn't like, had a just brilliant, eye-opening statement? Let's just take a few minutes and talk about what you all took away from that.
I'll speak.
Go ahead, yeah. Everybody's right now.
I enjoyed hearing about Will because he painted the big picture of funding and financing. somewhat depressing as funding sources are drying up or being, transitioned around. Not to be biased, but I really enjoyed Mike's presentation. Hearing his history of where he was and, the BART story, just was really kind of interesting of how that started years ago and where it's at today and promises made and, are they ever going to get that station, I guess you call it. And then, Darren Grossi was very interesting in regards to some of the projects that Sonora has, or that region, that area has been able to come up with in their ways of thinking. I just appreciated that. And probably, next to Mike, Wendy, because I saw it as a, somewhat small city playing a game in a big world and how they were able to accomplish some projects. And it really kind of hit home with, here's Placer and they're dealing with the county on both ends and that lack of cooperation, but it sounds like it's turning around, getting cooperation. So I walked away with, feeling you really have to think out of the box. You no longer can think about, a city or a county. It's almost like a region. And you really have to have that kind of focus, I think, sitting in this capacity. So that partnerships. Growth in transit. I mean, that's kind of where it seems to be at this day and age. And, if we're not going to be doing it, I think the funding is going to be forcing us to be thinking along those lines and looking at that kind of transit system and what it's going to be. And, hearing Kate's story about I work here, I live here, I work there, and medical care there. And that's what kind of brought home to me that kind of regional approach to things. And I think there's a lot of people who probably do what Kate does, and we don't hear enough about that. And then just the overall funding. I mean, there's just, 30 projects, but, you have funding for one. So it's really important to have that alignment and communication to figure out how you can be supportive of this one project. You might have to give a little to get that one project done with hopes that there's that support as we continue to try to reach number 2. So it was overall, I enjoyed myself. I really didn't know what to expect. It was kind of interesting to see who was there and, why they were there and that sort of thing. So I enjoyed myself. I thought it was a good overall, for a first time going, not knowing what to expect. I was very impressed with I left and gained some information and really starts me thinking about, thinking out of the box. That's so important. And as you mentioned, the word alignment. That's what it's going to take to get anything done. So.
Thank you very much. Other impressions?
As a citizen member of the board, I have so much to learn because I have such little experience with all of these topics. So it was eye-opening that way, and I definitely learned a lot. But it was a little bit hard for me to keep focusing on the big picture that a lot of the people were talking about and that Will was talking about, because I'm kind of consumed with the current crisis that we have in our county, and it's hard for me to look past that a little bit in terms of thinking about not having a lot of funding coming down the pipe, and that all these funding sources on a national level are drying up, but on a county level, we don't have the operating budget or the staff or the mobilization to use the funding that we do have. And so in the immediate past, we've had to kind of strategize on emergency level basis to shuffle money around, and it's kind of on a crisis mode to see what we're going to do with the money that we've already been allocated. And so for me, it's like, well, I appreciate that everybody's telling me that we're not going to have any more money, but we're having a really hard time using the money that we do have now. So what does it matter? Kind of. I mean, that's my citizen view a little bit, because I'm not that familiar with it. And the day-to-day, it seems like we're already in this little crisis. So bring it on. I mean, I don't know, But, and I would have to say in terms of alignment, I also struggle with that because we're in such upheaval in the county in terms of we have an interim public works director. I have no idea what the permanent person who may fill that position, where their focus and priorities are going to be, and hopefully it's in line with, the coordinated public transit human services transportation plan that we have, but I don't know that. I don't know who our permanent long-term transit manager is going to be. So in terms of building an alliance there, I can happily work with the people that are in the department now and do the best, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, are they going to be here for a month? Is Scott coming back? Are they going to be here in 6 months, 2 years? I don't know. So as a citizen member, those are like my immediate issues that I can't get over almost to focus on some of the bigger ones, because it's hard for me to see how we're going to keep going, building these alliances when we're in such upheaval at the county level here. And that's kind of where my head was at the policy summary.
Appreciate that. Anybody else want to wade into the pool?
I'll just briefly say I did enjoy and was very pleasantly surprised at how much information was out there, new information, that it wasn't just going through a conference to sit there and doodle, but actually I learned a lot there. Favorite speakers, I guess, aside from the facilitator, my favorite speaker, which would be you, was Will. I appreciate his overview and kind of agree with Kate. It's not a pretty picture, but I think the rest of the folks did kind of feed into it with some ideas of giving the dismal picture, some suggestions with Placerville, and also more how we can deal with the limited funding. And I may get ahead of myself, but one of the goals or something I think we may want to look at, which addresses what Kate is saying, to deal with the limited funding. Folks really emphasize the need to have projects ready on the shelf. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how you get the money to do all the planning, but it seems to me, one, that will help us be a priority position for limited funding, and we'll get rid of some of the chaos, if you will. If we got to spend the money, what are we going to spend it on? If we can move forward a little more with the planning and actually have projects ready to go, I think would be good.
Great.
So maybe if we were to jump ahead, and we can still build on takeaways, but jump ahead to the slide, that one more, Amber. So I'm always fascinated by group dynamics, because we tend to round the conversation out just by listening to the individual perspectives. So implications for COG. I think you've all said it. A strange trip that we're going to embark on the next many years. Money's not, the funding situation is not like anything we've seen before. To the extent that there is money, the priorities that go to those programs don't necessarily reflect the traditional rural values and policies and perspectives that we've had. The demographic changes, totally separate from state and federal policy, the demographic changes and the generational changes with the younger people also tend to be more urban-centric and are looking for different lifestyles and different housing products. And it doesn't mean that those can't be provided in the rural counties. I think that goes to Darren Grossie's point, Darren being the speaker from Tuolumne County. So implications for COG in terms of what you heard. And maybe said a different way, with the capacity that you have at a staff level, the ability to convene, the knowledge base that's around transportation and all the associated issues, that's on one side. On the other side, we could break the county region down by mode of transportation, by geography, in any other way that you wanted to do that, and throw a dartboard at that map and you'd hit a need. And so the question in large part becomes, amongst all the needs that are out there, which ones of those might match up best, just intuitively to you, with what you know about COG and what you heard last week at the policy conference? And you can let that marinate for a second.
I mean, I would say that, I don't know if this answers your question directly or not, but another thing that I got out of the policy conference was that I felt the need for the rural communities to work together. As a citizen, I hate the idea of, Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne being competitive in nature, and so that we're not collaborating to become stronger. Because if it's true that we're really competing against urban areas for these dollars, then if we're doing it as individuals, we're far weaker. And if we can somehow figure out ways to build those alliances so that we're not seen as possibly taking monies from the other and stepping on the other toes in terms of getting projects done, but working together towards some type of unifying goal, whatever that may be, improving transit and road conditions in our whole Highway 49 corridor. It just seems to me that we obviously need to be on each other's side, because obviously most of the rest of the state isn't. And that I did get out of the policy conference, is I hope that we can build better working relationships. I don't know how much communication is between our staff and Tuolumne and Amador's staff, if it's a regular and a lot, but I hope so, and I hope that continues. I hope we help each other as much as we can,
Yeah, I think definitely the communication between COG, Amador, Tuolumne, San Joaquin, Stanislaus, it's pretty consistent and regular. And there are definitely strong networks and partnerships that exist within the region. I think I'm really happy to hear you say this and look at it in terms of potential for the COG. And while I appreciate what Matt was saying is our core functions, do them well, I still firmly believe in that we could have another 2 or 3 years of COG core functions and doing them well. But I also think that regional agencies are positioned for partnership strategically and effectively. I think it's what we do well. It's one of those core functions. And I think the other thing that I'm really proud of is I think over the years, those partnerships are reciprocated. I think we are viewed as a trusted partner. So I think and I think too, just for the local jurisdictions, I think you're kind of disadvantaged as a local jurisdiction when you sort of go outside your boundaries and extend a hand of partnership, because that's not typically standard operating procedures or your line of business typically. So I think that that's a great suggestion and something for COG to think about in terms of facilitating regional partnership, regional coordination beyond Calaveras County and looking to our partners and Amador, Tuolumne, San Joaquin, Stanislaus. And they could be on issues like, Sharon Schersinger identifying those rural policy statements, things that she feels from a rural counties task force are important. Maybe those are things that we could work with, coordinating with other rural agencies so that our voice gets stronger and grows. It's not just Calaveras County, and do that on behalf of our member agencies. Maybe it's facilitating discussions with the other counties, and we're doing this with the organizational and maintenance analysis, is we are facilitating those discussions with the other counties. How do you run your system? What does it look like? And how can we help Calaveras County do better with theirs? The Coordinated Human Service Plan is a good example of looking at shared efficiency, partnering with Tuolumne County and saying, can we look at shared contracts, and just sort of starting the discussions. So I think that that's a really important point to make, because I think it's what the COG does and it's what we do well.
So building on that, one of the points that Wendy Thomas made that wasn't something that I was anticipating, but I thought it was a gold nugget, and she talked about how within El Dorado County, the city, the county, the irrigation district, some of the other big governmental players had at one time 20 years ago met on a very regular basis, twice a year, and they would kind of break bread and just talk. It was, there were notice meetings, but there was no agenda, and it was just to communicate. And so, that process stopped. And when that process began again, some of the conversations that bore fruit were not things that anybody on a staff level or any board member or council member could have identified, but they just were in the moment. This was topical, and the two of us talked, and all of a sudden we thought, well, what about this or that? And so the magic of that aha started with the how, the petri dish. As being the catalytic change, not the identification that we've got to jump in and solve this particular problem. And so one of the things I'd ask is, would it be helpful for COG to wade into that water and, separate from what you do as a joint city-county entity, be a convener of some other conversations that are, low cost, low effort to put on, but might be places to take this conversation more deeply. Is that something that feels right or not right? Because this is pretty community specific.
I'd say it certainly couldn't hurt. Conversation, would gravitate around, common interests, common problems, and, whether it's Angels Camp talking to the Murphys community or Angels Camp talking to the Copperopolis community, we have common problems, common interests, and whether it be within the utility services. Yeah, I would certainly think that there could be some ahas that come out of those conversations.
Another specific instance that came out of the policy conference that I know several of you have already mentioned it either today or last week right after the event, and that was some of the comments from Darren Grossi and what they were doing in Tuolumne County, which were quite innovative and ahead of the times 4 and 5 years ago, but now really bearing fruit, going back to the point of now having shelf-ready projects that are right in the sweet spot of where the funding is coming from. And so, when you hear about things like Vision Sonora, is the reaction, it's not typically what we do around here, but maybe that's kind of the trend and that would be kind of cool and maybe we should look into it? Or is it, no, that doesn't feel right for our community?
Oh yeah, we need Vision San Andreas in a big
I
way.
was just going to say, that was my thought as he was talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We need all those projects and all those ideas and all those results and all that funding. I mean, we definitely need a facade upgrade for San Andreas. The corridor coming through the community is I think a source of, it's like a sore point for most people in the county. I would say it's not a very good representation of what we have to offer here.
Right.
So, can I speak on that? So, I've done a lot of studying on the history of San Andreas and San Andreas itself, and Valley Springs, actually. San Andreas actually has a pretty good group of folks that work well together. And so I would say that it'd be pretty easy to get a bunch, to get a group together to do exactly what you're saying. As a matter of fact, we'll be working on that here really quick. Valley Springs, on the other hand, that area is pretty divided. And so there's like 4 groups of people that just, constantly divide. And then there's a few people that actually keep that going. And so I'm working really hard down there to stop that from happening. San Andreas used to be a very viable community. Used to be one of the most vibrant communities is what I meant. Used to be one of the most vibrant communities in the whole county. And when the cement plant and when we had industry there. A lot of things changed that. Part of it was when Caltrans came through and changed the city, because they actually tore part of it out. And I think since then, and it's not I don't know if it's a bad thing, but since then the city of San Andreas has not been able to recover their identity. So they kind of got their heart ripped out. They ripped out part of their old historical town. And ever since then, it seems, they've just kind of died off and they've been struggling. So, and then of course the industry left and that just didn't help anything at all. So it'll take quite a bit of coordination to get that back. And I feel that it's possible. But we need a lot of help from everywhere. So in the meantime, and it's a county township. And then you have the circulation problems. Valley Springs is another place we have really bad circulation problems. And so, so the economy in those areas are struggling tremendously. And what's weird about that is it's where all the industrial land is. So we have most of the industrial land, and we haven't invested where the county as a whole could benefit mostly from economic development because of its industrial land. And so I'm struggling with that, actually. I know that the industry that was left to us after the building industry left was tourism, and that's our biggest industry right now. It's kind of like being on a roller coaster, right? So if we have snow, hey, we have a great industry. If we have water, we have a great industry. If people have disposable income down in the valley or in the Bay Area, we have a great industry, right? If we don't, we have none. So then we're left with second place, ag. So ag is pretty consistent at where it's at, but it's not really, something that we're going to be able to live on.
Right.
Yeah, because of our water infrastructure and all of that. So I struggle with all of this because I think that the whole county could benefit from developing its most potentially economic points and developing infrastructure around that area so that you can have a very solid, diverse economy. Yeah, economy, so that's that. And to me, that's where we should be investing. And it just hasn't happened. So, and I understand the city of Angels because they're trying really hard to survive and be, viable or be a really, and they're a really great community, and they've done a really great job up there. And so, but they will still, our economies are a little different because theirs are based mostly on tourism too. They rely on people coming in and, spending their money at the stores and that sort of thing. Broadband just came up through there not too long ago, so that could help once they turn it on. And but the industrial area of our county is where it is. So that's where I struggle mostly.
Well, I think what Cliff is saying, economic development is the bigger global issue in the counties. So how do we take the transportation piece of that and get the biggest bang out of that? All of these mountain communities.
Question. Yeah, I think that's a great question.
The geography of our communities is a big obstacle to developing good transportation systems. Angels Camp was formed around Angels Creek where the gold was discovered, and people started building houses up the hillside. There's other than new subdivisions, there's no standard streets. And that's the same for San Andreas and, Murphy's, Arnold, wherever. So, since we're really chasing transportation dollars and trying to capture those and use them in the best way, how do we do that so that the spin-off benefit or the ripple effect of that feeds into our economic development needs?
And the strongest regional agencies in rural and in urban areas in California essentially tackle those Gordian knots of policy issues as a whole, and don't, although transportation is the predominant function, transportation and land use and economic development and certain environmental impacts, they're all interwoven. And so I think it's totally appropriate for that to be on the table. A couple of things I would interject to the conversation. I do think one opportunity for rural regions to work together is the fact that as I go around the state and do a lot of work in kind of my home county, El Dorado County, a little bit here, Del Norte County, there's something that's quite the common thread is exactly as you said. The two economies that are left to us are tourism and agriculture, and tourism is tied to a whole bunch of variables we really don't control, and it is very much a roller coaster ride, just in the same way the state budget is probably too closely tied to capital gains taxes. So the state budget's up and down and up and down. So El Dorado Transportation Commission's done this Beta Basin study, and it's got a financing element to it, and Sharon mentioned this. Sharon Scherzinger mentioned it. I think for tonight, I would just put it on staff's radar screen to take a look at that analysis, which is essentially trying to capture the fact that folks from the Valley and folks from the Bay Area come and recreate here, but they're not part of our population, and therefore our financing formulas don't reflect that. And so how do we come up with a different metric for allocating financing, which isn't to say that we deserve more, it's to say that we both work and play in each other's backyards, and the funding formulas ought to reflect that. And so I think that there's some things that COG might do to leverage that analysis and maybe even be a driving force to take what El Dorado started and carry the water on behalf of the larger area. I also think it's interesting in terms of infrastructure funding. 50 years ago, we thought about transportation dollars as building infrastructure, and that infrastructure drove our economies. And so it's one way to look at these new funding pots is to go, well, I'm not sure I see exactly how those are going to drive our new economy. And I think they will in the sense of how generations are changing and some of the things that are important. But I also think when you touched on broadband may be the next piece of infrastructure that really drives the economies in the decades to come. And so maybe it's appropriate for COG to be thinking about that broadband or internet connectivity. Historically in transportation, we've talked about pipelines as being a part of the transportation system, but they didn't get much play in our regional transportation plans. But pipelines and other ways of moving data and people and goods are really all viable transportation things. So to get back to the economic point, two things I would look at is trying to build upon this Beta Basin analysis and think about broadband infrastructure. Before we lose sight of the conversation we started about Vision Sonora, so one of the things that occurs to me is COG is working with the City of Angels right now in this 449 corridor study. And so is there any tie between what Sonora is trying to accomplish or has accomplished with their visioning process and what the city is trying to do with 449? And I'm asking it as an outsider. I don't know for sure.
Well, I have to admit, I'm not all that familiar with the Vision Sonora. They're basically refocusing on downtown. Right? In Angels Camp, we've got short-term and long-term objectives. The 4 and 49 project that we call Heritage Oaks, we recognize that's more long-term. It's got some real infrastructure deficiencies. It's got challenges with access from the state highway system. And in this struggling economy, it's going to be difficult to recruit large retailers. We know that a big box retailer would not be interested in our community, but there's medium type format stores, and we're putting a lot of energy into trying to attract that. And the first stage of that 4 and 49 project is we need to reach some understandings and get some consensus between our partners at Caltrans, figuring out where the access is going to be. So that is good, but it's not going to yield any fruit for many years ahead. So we're trying to fill storefronts downtown. We basically have a historic downtown mall that happens to have a state highway running through the center aisle. And we got to get people out of their cars, out of that state highway, and to park and get out of their cars and start walking up and down our storefronts. And that's our more immediate challenge in what we're doing in terms of trying to fill storefronts and improve the streetscapes and so forth in downtown.
And I
So
got
to that extent, I would say, yeah, we are replicating what Sonora is doing. And earlier tonight, I had a little side conversation with John Gedney, and I want to touch bases with some of the Sonora people to get some of their ideas on how they want to treat Highway 49 in their downtown.
Would it be appropriate or helpful for COG to try to facilitate that dialogue and bring some of that?
Absolutely, yeah.
So we
Yeah.
can.
We have common issues. And San Andreas has those same common issues.
a little bit different. I actually think that Angels Camp does a really fabulous job with DAC. You know, that's a really active group. They're very organized. They're, I think actually Angels Camp is well on its way, to tell you the truth.
Well,
They
and
do a
we've
very
been
good
told
job.
that by a number of people. One thing I keep hearing over and over again is that luck in terms of economic development is when preparedness meets up with opportunity. And that also plays out for transportation funding with the idea of shelf-ready project. You got to be prepared with projects when the funding opportunities come about, because it's such a competitive environment. If you don't have something that's ready to go, somebody else will.
I think that's an important point to make note of, the shelf-ready project discussion, because as we go through our call for projects, I think that's exactly the input that I'm looking for from the council. Is economic development and is a priority. Having shelf-ready projects is a priority. Our last cycle, what we did is we tried to fund as many projects through to construction as possible, and put actually local funds on some construction projects. So I think the goal then this year might be, let's fund as many projects through environmental and design, and then put ourselves out there to be competitive for construction funding through active transportation programs. That's different than what we did last time. It's a little bit risky because then we've got the investment on these shelf-ready projects and we're out there competing for funds, but I think it makes us more competitive in those statewide pools. And it does what Dinah was saying, is we need those on-the-shelf projects. So maybe that's a discussion that we have with the technical advisory committee, and we ask them sort of where they are in their planning processes and what they need from this call to get them to that place where they've got those ready projects.
And then how do you plan for local match? You know, how do you?
Well, typically, we can be the local match on bigger projects, and we fund a percentage of their total projects, or we look at putting more of our money on those planning phases of the projects and not just the local match amount. So and we can really work with the city and county to kind of identify what their list of projects are, what the costs of those are. The council may decide, you know what, we want to plan 100% of PNED for a city project instead of 10% of a match for a county project. So it really is just looking at what the projects are, getting to know what your goals and objectives are, economic development, project readiness, those kinds of things, and then having the city and county go out and identify those priorities and see how they compete against your objectives.
So I wanted to do a quick time check, because we wanted to stay to a really lean and mean time frame. These kind of conversations sort of can bear fruit to a certain point and then not. So maybe looking for some direction from the chair, if you kind of like us to wind this down for today, kind of loop back through the technical advisory committee. I've got a couple other questions I could facilitate if we want to go deeper.
Well, you know, I don't want to cut off the discussion. So, I mean, if everybody's still engaged, I would say we go at least another half hour. Because I've got a lot of comments that I've been saving. I don't want to put a damper on things and let when I gear up, yeah, you'll hear my comments.
Yeah.
You know, I've been here a long time. I've seen a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
You know, well, I'll just give you some of my comments now so you know where I'm coming from. You know, I think your premise of aligning for future funding sources is probably the most salient thing I've heard this evening and at the policy conference. Tuolumne has done it. El Dorado has done it. There's examples are, you know, all over the place on good agencies that have looked out into the future and seen what the federal government is doing, seen what the state government is doing. And they'll start building projects that are then ready to go when that money comes down the pike. Well, we know FHWA is going to be reauthorized. We know they're putting stuff in there right now. Will told us what the project priorities are going to be. We have a very smart staff. I would challenge you guys to come up with projects that will meet those funding sources, and then get the Public Works Director and get the City Planning Director on board so that we're talking about the same thing. I mean, Kate hasn't been here very long, but she hit the nail on the head. Money is coming to us, and we're not spending it. It's like, what the heck are we doing here? You know, I mean, there's money out there. And if there's any frustration that I have, not only as a board member in the past, but as a council member now and previously, is I see money slipping through our hands. It just goes right on by. It goes right on through us. And I don't really have a ready answer for that. But I can tell you it's very frustrating. So if there's any way to tailor projects that we know we need in this county for economic development and other things, and tie them to a future funding source, that's absolutely what we should do. I would make it a very strong goal of this board and the Board of Supervisors, and of course I can't do anything about it, so I'm going to just speak to the two members that are here, get a Public Works Director that will work in concert with this board. I have seen so many Public Works Directors come and go and not be able to get things done in this county because they don't have a way to communicate or something with the COG Board. That to me is another huge frustration. I don't know why it occurs. It doesn't seem to be as prevalent in the city. The city does seem to be able to work with the COG and get things done. And I don't know why we can't do that with the county. As far as Vision San Andreas, Vision West Point, Vision whatever, I've seen so many economic profiles done in this county that it just makes my head ache. The last one we'd had done, I was at Castle and Cook and participated in one. We spent $100,000 creating the Calaveras profile. Whatever happened to the Calaveras profile? We don't need to reinvent the wheel on that. That's already been done. It's a shelf-ready thing that we ought to be giving to anybody that's interested in this region. I mean, that's out there. It's ready to go. It's only about a year old, I mean, as far as I know. So if you take a look at the towns in this county that are doing good, you take a look at Murphy's, you take a look at Angels Camp, and you take a look at the potential for Copperopolis, it's because people are investing money into those areas. Why are they investing money into those areas? That's the question you have to ask. And the other question you have to ask, and again, I don't mean to appear to be beating up on the Board of Supervisors, but we need a general plan. Effectively, what we have in this county, in my mind, is a building moratorium. You can't bring anything here because you don't have a general plan. And the environmental community is steering that boat because they basically say, well, we'll sue you if you try to do anything because you have a deficient general plan. As long as you have these overlaying community plans that need to be incorporated into the general plan, it doesn't seem like it's ever going to get there. So at some point, good leadership, and I think we have good leadership in this county, not only on this COG board, but on the Board of Supervisors. If we can tie those things together and get a general plan, and come what may, if the environmental community doesn't like it or the community groups don't like it, at least you have something that you move forward and then you start adding those things on. That's my recommendation on that. Broadband is already here. It's in Copper, it's in West Point, it's in some of the other regions. I mean, I think that's, again, something to build on. Is there money that's available for doing something where you know you already have infrastructure in place? I mean, that's already there. I mean, we ought to be building on that. I like the idea of consolidation. I've always liked the idea of consolidation. When I was on the Board of Supervisors, I wanted to consolidate the fire districts. Well, you know, shame on me for bringing that up. But I got to tell you, we ought to be consolidating public transit with the other 3 counties or 4 counties. We ought to be building regional projects with our SJCOG, with Amador, with El Dorado, with all of the region that we're in. We ought to be doing more tri-county partnerships, however you want to define it. I think that is the wave of the future. As I sit in this seat now, knowing what I've seen in government over the past 15 years, those that are taking advantage of consolidating their efforts and taking advantage of the money that's there, and Will told us this, we've got to think outside the box, and that's the way you do it, in my opinion. So there's a lot more that I can say about this, and I could go on and on for the whole half hour. But again, I don't want to cut off the dialogue. I think it's too important, because if it starts right here, that we're able to bootstrap Calaveras County and get ourselves going and get into the real world again and not have dollars pass through us, I think that would be a worthwhile goal for the COG. I really do. And I think you've got two good board members here on the Board of Supervisors that could take that challenge and take that impetus to their boards and start driving the ship. You're doing a good job on economic development. You're talking more about economic development than I've heard talked about in this county in the past 20 years that I've lived here. I've seen fits and starts. I've heard people talk about it, but we don't do anything about it. You're trying to get something done, and I applaud that. I applaud Debbie as well. So, I mean, you can tell I'm frustrated. I've been here a long time. I've seen a lot of things happen, and I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in the leadership of this county. Not currently. In the leadership in the past in this county, we've let things go. We haven't taken advantage of people like David Murdoch, one of the richest men in the world, has come into Calaveras County to try to invest dollars, and we didn't take advantage of it. Still out there trying.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not making the case for Castleton Cook, but I'm telling you, there is very wealthy people that have tried to invest dollars here, and we don't take advantage of that. John Counts has beat his head against the wall here to do what he's done, and it shows. Help them do what they're trying to do. If we can get our message out of this board right now, to have that filter out into the community, I think you guys would all be heroes. So that's my comments.
So, as I continue, no, I don't think right now anybody's more frustrated than I am, because to me, we could sit here and rely on everybody else to fund us for everything. And I feel that we have resources in the county to be able to build our economic development to a point to where we can actually fund a lot of it ourselves. We are bleeding out in this county. So if you walk almost anywhere in the county, you will not find young people here. There's nobody here between the ages of 22 and 45, or very few. And if they are, they're usually not working. So, and we're actually paying for somebody to take them and become part of somebody else's economy. So I have a lot of frustration around that, because I own a business here. And each year, I see other businesses just drop off, and they don't get replaced. I see our customers drop off, and they don't get replaced. And so, to me, it's about us developing our economic strength. And so then when I see money, like in our county, and it's what made me run for this board, not for this one, but the Board of Supervisors. When I see things happen, in some of our departments that actually make it very difficult for us to grab some of the money that we could be grabbing, to do some of the projects we should be doing, or some of the projects that we do is ridiculous. It's very frustrating, because I want to put people to work here. I want to give people a choice. If we put people to work here, then the stores in Angels Camp will be full, and the stores in San Andreas will be full. just like they were 50 years ago. So now we're kind of stuck here fighting over scraps. And I'm a little bit sick of it, to tell you the truth. So that's why, and I've said it right from the get-go, I feel that we should be investing in our any infrastructure we can around circulation, or any infrastructure we can get funding for in our, where we can develop the biggest bang for economic development that we can. Tourism isn't going to be it. It'll be a part of it. But you got to have a diverse economy. We had the cement plant here, we had mines, and we had the timber industry here. When the cement plant left, it left a big old hole here. That was 500 and something jobs. Then the mining and the timber industry left, and then we had nothing, really. So, but we did have the building industry that came in and kind of gave us that smoke and mirrors look. You know, everybody was still partying about that, right about then. And so, you know, because all these people were migrating up from the Bay Area. So now what has happened, we have the average age of our volunteers here are 65 years old. So you go any of these Lions clubs or anything like that, 65 years old.
So does COG have a role in that economic development conversation?
I think they should, because, well, the highways go through every community. Every single community we have except Murphy's, really. So they play a big role in it.
And I just want to be clear in terms of the notes that Amber and I are taking. I think the third bullet down that says, how do we use transportation to drive economic development? My question, I think your answer is that maybe COGS has some role, at least as a convener, to talk about that the larger economic development conversation, not just as it relates to being driven by transportation infrastructure.
Yes.
Three things that the chair said that I wanted to kind of emphasize and see if the group is in sync with this. It's my belief, as he indicated, picking up on other speakers, that getting projects shelf-ready and delivered is really critical, and that is not an in vogue or out of vogue concept. That's been the case my entire career. That will always be the case. The reason that's the case is because the people who give the money out want to give the money out and get it on the ground. And that's not anything more than essentially politically selfish, because why do you want to give money to somebody who have to be reelected 3 times in order to see that happen? That's impractical. And so this idea of having project shelf ready is just part and parcel of who we are in this country. Second thing is, plans don't build themselves. And so people ask me what I do for a living. I purposely don't say that I started my career in planning. I get things done, because I left Stanislaus, your sister agency in Stanislaus County, years ago, because all they did was do plans that fulfill statutory requirements and put them up on a shelf, and nothing ever got done. And I thought, this is insane. And by contrast, I went to work in Merced County, same exact sister agency, highly progressive, did all of the sort of process and infrastructure with early years of GIS, and did amazing things, because they were out of the box and not trying to do plans, because plans don't build anything. You can't drive on a plan, you can't walk on a plan. So I would highly encourage you to not lose sight of that. The third thing that, and another that is not an in or out of vogue thing, is partnerships. So I can go back to where I started my career in Modesto, and the partnerships that happened in Stanislaus and Merced County. We look at some of the early years of the Tri-County partnerships up here, and it didn't play out the way that it could have for a variety of different reasons. That's not a negative reflection on partnerships. Some of the successes in El Dorado County and throughout California are all based in partnerships. And a lot of those partnerships didn't start with, I want to do this and you want to do that, how do we get them both done? Some of them started with, hey, we're neighbors and we share some common problems, and so how do we do that? And I think the greatest success, and the reason I was so proud to share a podium with Will, is years ago, Will Kempton was essentially the transportation guru for the city of Folsom, and I was the transportation guy in El Dorado County, and we went head to head because he needed to get light rail extended to Folsom, and I needed to get carpool lanes built on Highway 50, and he told me, I'll be damned if you let your carpool lanes beat the light rail projects. And I went behind his back, I'll admit this today, to the city manager and I said, we need a joint resolution, your city council and my board of supervisors, that we will co-equally support both projects. Reality was, they both got funded. And Will was astounded. And he asked, how did you do that? Well, it goes back to your point. Partnerships make the people who give the money out, their job easier. Because now they don't have to make one person unhappy and one person happy. They can make two people happy in one equation. That's gold. And the last thing that I would emphasize that was brought up is the importance of the county public works function. And I'll tell you, in every single Northern California county, there is a tension between the county public works department and the regional transportation planning agency. Some of it is just endemic. Some of it's a planner versus engineer thing. A lot of the transportation agencies started as functions of the public works department, and John Getney remembers this because John lived through this in El Dorado County. And then when they split off, the cultures take decades to erode. But the alignment between those functions is highly important, and it's an unnatural relationship when it comes to counties and RTPA. So don't be ashamed or afraid of it. Just acknowledge it is what it is, and it's important to acknowledge that so you can go beyond. And that tension, for whatever reason, doesn't happen with cities. And so Sharon Scherzinger inherited an agency that her predecessor went to the legislature and changed the makeup of the commission because the city of Plattsburgh was getting too much money relative to their population percentage. And what they really failed to realize was in 1997, we started the vote, we asked as the COG staff, how can we help? And the city said, we'd like you to help with X, Y, and Z. And the county was a little reticent. Well, we're not sure we really trust. And so 15 years later, the city's still getting disproportionately more money. And that's just, it goes back to the point about partnerships. It goes back in terms of the relationship between the Public Works Director and COG. So if I was to summarize what we have here so far, we have a lot about partnerships, coordination. COG is the convening entity, developing shelf-ready projects that are aligned with the funding sources as they exist. So if I just stop and are we generally in agreement with those concepts? And it's okay to not be in agreement, but it's also important that Melissa know where those tension points are.
Yeah.
Well, I think Melissa knows where my tension points are.
I think the other really
Just saying.
The other really separate categories are around consolidation of COG's role in economic development. And so any discussion about COG being a convening agency to just look generally at issues of consolidation, generally at issues of economic development. And the idea today isn't that we talk at the 50,000-foot level and then we immediately go to some, we're now going to go do this. The question is just, are these some areas that we feel comfortable having explored by the COG staff and the city and the county and the other TAC members, and then have that feedback to you all? Because we're trying to get an idea of the general direction, drill it down to some more bite-sized tasks that can come back to you. Okay, so consolidation issues and economic development issues on the table.
I would just assume, Matt, if you don't hear an objection, then
Okay.
proceed.
Well, I actually like that, to be honest with you, ever since I've been on this board here, I felt competition against Angels. Because that's where it seems a lot of the money goes, right? But I work really well with Debbie, because I know her, I guess. So I like the idea of coming together and more, working together. I like that, and having common goals. At not at 50,000 feet though, a little lower.
There's just a lot of opportunity in that, and it's just this historical, territorial.
It's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Enough is enough.
We have accomplished in 1 year a whole lot of stuff because we actually are not territorial. We work together well, and so I would much rather see our whole county do that. Angels, when I think of projects, a lot of times, like we were talking about broadband here just recently, And I was thinking, well, you know, we really need to try to figure out how to get the broadband to go from Vallecito to Arnold, because that's the part that hasn't been done yet. I was thinking of that. I wasn't thinking about how I'm going to get it somewhere on my end of the county. Because that, to me, is important to tie it all together. Because everybody benefits from it across the county. And I just really believe we need to stop feeling like we're competing and start feeling like we're helping each other out. Because it's us against the rest of them. That's the way I look at it. It's us against the rest of them.
So, one bullet that I'd suggest Amber add to this is just the role of when you sit at COG, it's easier to do that. It's easier to look on a regional perspective. And so I appreciate people who have extensive academic credentials. I like to get stuff done, so I can't live for too long in the academic world. But if I was ever forced to go back to school, I would do a thesis looking at how jurisdictions are structured, and those where they are elected by district and those that are elected by the general population. The disparity, in my experience, is huge in terms of the ability to align and get things done. So I look at the city of Sacramento and I look at the city of Folsom, and their abilities to get things done have nothing to do, in my opinion, with much other than just the fact their council in Sacramento is elected by district and their council in Folsom is elected as a whole. And it makes it easier to align your priorities when you're essentially being elected by the same constituencies. And so you all from the county don't have, from the Board of Supervisors, don't have that luxury. So at least in this setting, you have some ability, it's easier to sit in this setting and think more regionally. And that's just an important thing to keep in your minds.
It is. I relate to that because I served on the city council.
Right.
So there were 5 of us and we were from the City of Angels. You get on the board and it's like, okay, you have your district
Right.
and you got the other 4 districts, and it's, and I don't think that way. It's Calaveras County. And it's, again, I even look beyond, it's a region. I mean, why does it just have to drop off at the rivers? We have a lot of commonalities on places on both sides of us that I think, again, that transportation and even economic development, it's more of a regional approach and not so much Calaveras County.
And that's why the COGS and the other regional agencies, in my opinion, have been more successful in these transformational changes, because you get in this room and it's just sort of understood that you're under a different umbrella. Now, it's important when everybody leaves this room that we go check in with the city staff and the broader city council, and we leave and we check with the county staff and the broader board of supervisors so that we're not diverted. But one of the benefits to COG being a convener on all the topics you've identified is you have the ability to sort of, by nature, be outside the box, and I think people generally respect that. A couple of you haven't said a whole lot, so I want to...
I would say I was not able to attend the policy at Ironstone for personal reasons. So I have not seen any of this, but I know that the City of Angels and the county are much better at cooperating. They have been with Caltrans and the other agency. And the city may be getting more money because of more cooperation between all the players, and I hope that that continues. And when we first moved to Calaveras County, when we first moved to Angels Camp, it was in 1995, the place was busy, bustling. There was a Safeway, there was a Beano's, there was Sprouts, right? They're all gone. So our economy is not as great as maybe the county thinks. And it's actually not coming back yet. We have new business. DAC is trying to get more business to the city. But I think, we need light industrial. We need something where people can work. Tourism is great, but tourists go home. And we need jobs for the people that are here, the young people, so we can keep them here. So anyway, I think that we need to do the regional, the tri-county or more counties. We need to cooperate, and we've been doing better with that since I've been on the COG. So those are my thoughts.
My feeling, kind of as the facilitators, is we're at a good point in terms of the breadth and the depth of the feedback. Seems like there's two things that maybe we want to do. One is to reiterate that Melissa and the COG staff will work with the technical advisory committee kind of to drill down on these, group them together. I'll offer no expense to just help take this to the next level so that it gets packaged up if that's something that you're interested in. And then I'd encourage the city council members and the supervisors to talk to your individual agency staffs and about these topics and anything else so that they can come prepared to the technical advisory committee, maybe put things on from the staff's perspective on COG's radar screen, COG staff's radar screen that aren't there. The other thing we probably ought to do is just give those in the audience that are here an opportunity to weigh in on the conversation as it's a public agenda item, and I'd be happy to respond to that.
That's certainly fine. Any public comment this evening on any of the discussion that you've heard or anything you want to weigh in on? Yes, Mr. Miller. My comments about Public Works directors were distinctly not.
I come and go. I'm always around. I think that gives me a little more freedom to say some things too. I sat back here and I know the frustration that I've seen at the Board of Supervisors level. I know that they've had, and Jim will correct me, maybe 8 or 9 Public Works directors in 15 years. Some have stayed longer than others. I don't think there's a single Public Works director that's been here in the last 8 or 9 or 10 years, short-term, long-term, whatever they've been here, that really had a vision of what the county wanted. We have people that pursue bridges. We have people that pursue what I call legacy-type projects, so they can always drive by at some point after they're retired and point things out. If a Board of Supervisors decided they were going to sit down and adopt some kind of plan countywide of what the most important projects were and decide that this is where our focus is going to be, that's what we need to do. The problem we have in Public Works today, we can't do an on-the-shelf project and have it ready to pull out. Melissa calls up and says, we got 30 days to get this package in. We have nothing on the shelf. We've spent our time with consultants, supervising consultants who are supervising consultants, to spend 10 years, and I'm just going to say this, so Burns Ferry Bridge, 10 years, $60 million. We're in it, I don't know, $400,000 or $500,000 in reports. The next phase is to request $1.5 million to do a preliminary environmental survey. And those are only good for a certain period of time. So you put that thing on the shelf after you spent $1.5 million, of which $400,000 has to come out locally, and it ages out in 5 years, or some new colored frog pops up, and we start over. So right now in this Public Works Department, what we're trying to do is bring things back in-house, not have this 17-bridge CIP program, and start focusing on the things that the community can actually see something happening, get some of our assets to work on the shelf projects that we don't have environmental considerations, staying within current right-of-ways. We have our own criteria internally for projects that we could literally put on the shelf and pull out when these kinds of funds become available. Like tonight, you showed an attachment to that sub-recipient agreement, and there's money that's in a placeholder position back to 9/10 for purchase of buses. 5 years worth of purchases of buses. We have buses with 250,000 miles on them, but the staff is so distributed over so many different things, there isn't focus, it's reaction. It's reaction every day. Some days it comes from the COG. We call it the Melissa. The emails start at 8 o'clock in the morning. And next day, it could be issues with snow plowing equipment. We have an engineering division that's smaller than a typical city has, and they have 1/10 or 1/20th of the land area and one type of weather. They don't deal with everything that's here. You take 25 people in the road department, 4 to 5 in each yard, and they're expected to maintain miles and miles of road. And the issue for us is that county has to have a focus and decide if it's time to pull back in, focus as a group regionally. The department has to have somebody that's going to take charge, that has a vision of what they want to see in 5 years, not to move on to another agency, but either live here or be from here or decide to stay here. And if I'd have known that these jobs were flipping over this fast 15 years ago, I'd have been here. This was the kind of place I looked for. And I just had to continue to work down there so I could just retire and be up here. So I think as a department, we need to focus locally. We need to think about what we're doing. We need to really expand transit. We've had the opportunity. We're making changes internally in that respect. But the board needs to also, and this is the hardest part. We are a district. Whatever you say about it, there's 5 districts. And when I talk about projects, we were talking about ATP. Angels Camp had a bunch of projects that were through a priority process where we winnowed ours down to 20, and then we winnowed them down again, and then we said, here's the projects that we think we could do in this 2-year time period. But at the same time, we left enough other projects on there that we didn't recommend because they didn't meet the highest criteria, like safe routes to school. There wouldn't be any matching. But we left them because you have to negotiate amongst each other. In the City of Angels Camp, you're negotiating in a couple square miles. In your districts, you're negotiating in 1,000 miles, and you all have different needs. And that's the issue for this department and the organization. You know, you've got CAO's turnover. Nobody has the plan. And if we did, it would be successful. It's just, we need to improve relationships with everybody. Charles Fields from Amador County. He's the only person I got a business card from. He said, come see me. Talked to Melissa. She said, oh, we'll make an appointment, go over and see him next week. That's the kind of regional cooperation you need. And it's an age thing. I'm just going to say this, say it anyway. But when I was 20 years old in Public Works, by the time I started moving into the office in my early 30s, we met every month with every other city in the county, Public Works Department people, and had luncheons. We had meetings. We had people in VFW. We had people in American Legion because we were all from a generation that gathered socially. My daughters, once their kids came, it was T-ball and everything else. They don't have time to socialize after work. They're with their families. And then when those kids grow up and they have families, they haven't been in these social networks. They may have them in their families, but they don't have them in their community. And today, what I am stunned by is we have the most technologically advanced society for communication, and it helps us not to talk to each other. Yeah. This conversation wouldn't take place. You'd all be sitting there right now if you're 25 years old texting, and you'd look up at Melissa and you'd say, uh-huh, and you'd go right back to texting. None of you would have interaction with each other, and that's part of this dynamic that's continuing to change. I read a lot, maybe too much, but when it snows, that's what I do. And you see all these things, these evolutionary things, and the result of it is exactly what we're seeing here. People are leaving. We can't find any reason to keep them here. We really can't. We need to bring them back. Tonight you're talking about recreation. I've seen 6 major bicycle races up here recently, and I've seen people come back on the following weekend to stay. That's another thing we can develop. Big Trees, we used to get a lot of European visitors at Big Trees. I don't hear very many foreign languages up there anymore because their economy's in the dumps. So,
2 years ago, man, I would had a bunch of Australian people coming through, and they come through here, they stop at the stores, they stop in Angels Camp on the way to Yosemite, and in Sonora, and
They travel a golden chain,
Haven't
that's
seen
what's
them.
advertised.
Haven't seen them in 2 years.
We have, not counting Lake Tahoe, we have the 3 nicest counties in the state of California, right on this here, and we're close to everything. We just need to focus on that. So, that's my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mike. I like it when you just say it. Because sometimes it seems like not a lot of people say much, and I try to figure it out, but I can't because no one's saying anything, so I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, can I say a few words to follow up with what Mike said? And I really appreciate Matt's wisdom. I think I'd like to add a word to alignment, symbiosis. I think symbiosis is something that's critically needed for on-the-ground stuff here. And we're talking about San Andreas. I drove in to the meeting tonight, and all I could see was blight. There's one lot overgrown with weeds. There's another building boarded up. If people want to invest and come in here and drop cash to fix this town, and they see that, are they really going to do that? No. And Mike touched on...
I was one of the dummies that did.
Did you? Well, here's what Wendy said, and Wendy's talked about it from Placerville. What she was doing was engaging volunteer groups, right? She went out to the Lions Clubs, she went out to the Rotary, she went out to youth groups, right, and got them energized. In Sutter Creek, my wife's working there right now in Sutter Creek, there's kids who are skateboarding in the parking lot. And she's the old man, get off my lawn, get off the parking lot, you can't skateboard here. Instead of doing that, she said, why don't you come to the city council meeting and go talk to the city council and see if there's some way they can get a skate park developed. These little kids, 5th and 6th graders, showed up at the city council meeting and made their pitch. That's how you do it. You get everybody involved, like Wendy suggested. You get everybody involved, and then people get out there on a weekend, and whoever the property owner is there, you got to talk to them, I guess. But you get people out there with weed eaters, and you whack it down, and that's what that lady said at your town hall in San Andreas. She said, I will invest, and I want to come to San Andreas and start a business, but I'm not going to go with 49 the way it looks right now, with the crown and all that stuff. She says, I'm not going to invest the way it looks. You got to fix it first, and then they'll come, right? Talking about transit to Big Trees. In Sonora, what they did there, and Darren touched on it, he said they were opposed to YARTs early on, but then they saw what a boom that was. They got a feasibility study, and now they're running buses, and not the shuttles. They got neat trolleys that are going downtown and stuff, but they have the other regular buses that are picking up people at hotels and taking them to Yosemite up 120 now. Do that to Big Trees. Heck, have transit system go into Big Trees. The other thing, and I really want to touch on this one. Will Kempton had a slide, and I meant to say this earlier. He had a slide that he presented at that conference. Remember he had them swapped. Remember how he showed the second level was local. He said the second level was local sales tax, and it was that little sliver, right? Because I made a mistake. It was actually the big, thick part on top, right? It wasn't a mistake. They don't want you to know that self-help counties are the ones who are going to help themselves. Dinah had it in her slide. She didn't mention it, but there was a quote there on the bottom of her slide. Help those who help themselves, right? It's all a symbiosis. You help yourself, and then others will come in and want to help you as well. Those people will start investing money in your communities when they see the community helping itself. A TIM fee program. You have a viable TIM fee program where development is paying its fair share. And then the state will come in and say, good for you. Good for you. We see that you're helping yourself. We'll invest some discretionary money. You don't want to be like Los Banos. Los Banos made, sorry, I get excited about this one. This is a great example. This is a great example. I'll give you some insight. Give you some insight in this Los Banos. If you drink through Los Banos, what a disaster, really. Yeah. It's a disaster.
I haven't, and I don't plan on it, really.
Because they let development do whatever they wanted to do. You want access here? You got it. You want access here? You got it. You want 3 driveways for your little shopping, your little convenience mart? You got it. All of a sudden, we have to come in as Caltrans and put in another signal because it's a safety issue now. One signal after another. We had to do it, right? Then Los Banos comes comes up, and it's their number one priority now in Merced, right? $250 million. They want to build a bypass around it now. You know what we said? No way. No way will headquarters put any money into a bypass in Los Panos. So they're stuck. It's their number one priority. It's their regional COG number one priority, and they can't build it because we won't invest a dime because of their land use decisions in the past.
I
I'm
would-
glad I took the genie out of the bottle.
And I just wanted to speak to the other topic that was brought up at the policy seminar, which was trust. Talking about a local tax, also talking about community participation and volunteer work. The ideas of those, I'm in support of. However, I think the issue of trust in the county of Calaveras would need to be worked on. And for me, you know, when $400,000 could be spent on a project that really hasn't gotten anywhere or had anything done with it, and then you turn around and ask the local people to start paying extra tax, there's no trust there. I think I would be in support of all the wonderful volunteer groups that we have coming out and cutting weeds and working, but not in a way that compensates for mistakes that have been made or ill use of funds that we have had. It's not a, hey, we're going to come out and fix your guys' mistake. It's, hey, we're doing something great and we want to show it to you and you guys get on board and we can all work together. That, I think, is a fantastic idea. But in the past, in Calaveras County, there's been a lot of mistakes and misuse of funds and a lot of money that has slipped through our fingers, like Paul Stein was talking about. And as a citizen, I don't then want to be turned to and say, okay, now you do it on your weekend on a Sunday because we couldn't get it done. That's unacceptable in my mind. I think it should be unacceptable for this board. I think it should be unacceptable for the Board of Supervisors to ask that of the community, because we've given you guys a job, we've elected you, and there's lots of funding out there. Like, just use it, and then don't come and say, by the way, we couldn't figure it out. We let these millions go here and 400,000 there and this and that, but we need a half-cent tax now. Because then what? What are you going to do with that money? That trust issue for me is huge, and I don't think we're anywhere close in my mind to being able to go down that road, because there's a lot of work. I believe, in my short experience here, that Mike Miller has been doing a great job in Public Works and trying to reprioritize and clean things up so that maybe some of that trust can be restored and we can start down another path. But I think it's a huge issue.
Okay, let's try to wrap up.
So, Mr. Getney, I was actually cleaning Highway 49 a couple of weeks ago from 49 and 12 all the way down to Gold Strike with the local VFW. And I was the youngest person there at 58. And the next person was right around 70. So, we did it. Good thing it was a cool morning.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
We got the highway program.
that's what they have.
So I think in terms of next steps, just to reiterate, COG staff will work with the Technical Advisory Committee, encourage you to work with your local agency staffs, build on this conversation in the months to come. And the one thing I would add, I think based on the comments from Councilmember Allen, is that, Melissa, when you and I work together, we should balance between some quick win things that can demonstrate some progress very quickly, versus some things that take a longer burn and that can allow trust to be built, because that is a huge aspect of it. So appreciate the opportunity to serve you tonight and hope that many good things come of this.
It's very good.
Thank you.
You did a good job.
I appreciate it.
Yes, we will summarize the comments from the board, both the county and Caltrans, and we'll put together a list similar to what we've done in the past. Thank you.
Okay, we've still got the balance of the agenda to go through, so we've got staff reports, item 15. Do you guys have anything else you want to report on?
We have nothing to add at this time.
Okay, council reports. I'll begin with Mr. Heminger down on that end.
Nothing to report, thank you.
Ready?
I just want to thank staff for the nice conference. I really enjoyed myself. Didn't know what to expect and walked out with a great experience. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It was a really good conference. Enjoyed the speakers, and I want to thank also for you coming tonight and opening this dialogue. I think it was kind of like way overdue, actually. And so I'll be able to go home now and sleep for the rest of the night. I haven't slept in like 6 months. Appreciate it, thank you.
Well, since I wasn't able to attend the policy conference, and I think I can get a CD.
Yes.
And I will be watching that at home. And
Hope
that's
your
my
husband gets
comment.
well soon.
Thank you.
Same comments, Matt. Thank you for a great job, and thanks to the COG staff. Just time
Okay.
well spent.
Thank you as well.
And I would echo that sentiment. I actually heard from Supervisor Callaway that was one of the better conferences she's ever attended. So in 23 years, that's been a lot. You know? So our
It was right here at
staff
home.
did a very good job. Yeah, right here at home. You bet. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll stand adjourned until our next scheduled meeting, June 4th, same time, same place. I'll see you then. Thanks very much.